The Montana wilderness had been Alara Vance's refuge, a stark, unforgiving landscape mirroring the chasm in her soul. For 3 years, the remote cabin, nestled deep within a dense pine forest, served as both her sanctuary and her prison. 3 years since the sterile scent of the veterinary clinic had become unbearable, since the image of Dr. Silas Thorne's lifeless eyes in the young deer Martha bleeding out on the cold steel table had seared themselves into her memory. That day, she had made a solemn vow. Never again would she open her heart or her hands to the fragile vulnerability of another life. Her bi-weekly supply run into the nearest town was a ritual of quiet endurance. The rusted gears of her old pickup truck groaned a familiar tune as she navigated the treacherous mud-rutted track, a route that had become etched into her very bones. Every mile was a conscious effort to maintain the impenetrable walls she had built around herself, a shield against the creeping dread of attachment, of loss, of the pain that had once consumed her. The routine was mundane, predictable, safe, until it wasn't. A nondescript cardboard box sat starkly in the middle of the desolate road, an incongruous block of man-made refuse amidst the ancient, wild beauty. Alara's foot instinctively hovered over the brake, her mind already protesting. Keep driving. It's not your problem. But as she edged closer, a sound, faint and high-pitched, sliced through the rumble of the engine and the wind whistling through the pines. A desperate whimper, barely audible, yet it resonated deep within a place she thought long dead. It broke through the carefully constructed silence of her existence, a siren call to a past she had desperately tried to bury. Her knuckles white on the steering wheel, Alara fought the primal instinct to accelerate, to flee. Her breath caught in her throat. The sound was too small, too vulnerable. A profound, agonizing decision wrestled within her, her vow screaming in protest against a deeper, buried compassion. Finally, with a sigh that seemed to draw all the air from her lungs, she stomped on the brake, the truck lurching to a stop. Slipping out into the biting April chill, the scent of damp earth and melting snow filling her nostrils, Alara approached the box with trepidation. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic rhythm against the quiet thrum of the forest. Who would do this? She muttered, the question more a desperate plea than an accusation as she stared down at the cruel anonymity of the cardboard. With trembling hands, she reached for the flaps, lifting them gingerly. Inside, huddled together for warmth, were four impossibly tiny, black-furred creatures. Their eyes were still sealed, their bodies no bigger than her palm, twitching minutely with the effort of breathing. They were newborns, utterly abandoned, a horrifying certainty settling over her. They would die, quickly and miserably, without immediate intervention. The fragile weight of new life settled into Alara's palms as she carefully lifted the box. Her hands, once steady and assured in their purpose, now trembled with the reawakening of a burden she had sworn off forever. She rushed back to the cabin, adrenaline sharpening her focus, her mind already cataloging supplies, improvising. Milk replacer, an old syringe, a makeshift feeding tube fashioned from tubing meant for something else entirely. Every movement was precise, yet laced with a desperation she hadn't felt in years. 3 of the pups latched on, weakly but persistently. The smallest, whom Alara instinctively named Hope, struggled. Her weak whimpers, thin and desperate, pierced through Alara's renewed resolve, a direct challenge to her fragile composure. I can't. I swore, Alara whispered, her voice cracking, the memories of her past losses rising like specters. Hope let out another tiny, desperate sound. But I can't leave them. Hours later, the pups, finally replete and curled into a contented heap on a heated blanket, Alara collapsed onto the worn floorboards. Exhaustion, bone-deep and profound, washed over her, but it was the emotional toll that truly weighed her down. She stared at the sleeping bundles, a hollow ache in her chest. She had shattered her vow. She had opened the door to attachment, to inevitable pain, to the very vulnerability she had fled. Just one more life, Martha. Please, Dr. Thorne's last words, spoken over the dying deer. Echoed in her mind, a haunting refrain. Alara whispered, not again, not again. That night, as the fire crackled, casting long, dancing shadows across the cabin, Alara watched the pups sleep. Their fur was an unusually dark, almost inky black, absorbing the dim light. Their ears were more pointed than she would have expected, and their paws, even at this tiny size, seemed disproportionately large. It was a subtle, unsettling difference, a quiet anomaly that, despite her wariness, registered deep within her professional mind. A flicker of unease, barely perceptible, took root amidst the overwhelming fatigue and despair. Ilara's life, once a predictable rhythm of solitude, dissolved into a blur of frantic activity. Every 3 hours, day and night, she was sterilizing bottles, mixing formula, feeding, and then meticulously cleaning up after the four tiny, insatiable creatures. The cabin, once her sanctuary from the world, now echoed with the soft sounds of tiny paws, the hungry whimpers, and the undeniable pulse of new life. Sleep became a luxury, her own needs secondary to the demanding, relentless cycle of care. A quick, pre-dawn trip to Whitefish was necessitated by the need for proper puppy supplies, more than the cabin's limited stock could provide. At the general store, Brenda Miller, a woman whose keen eyes missed nothing, remarked on Alara's haggard appearance. "You look like you've been wrestling a grizzly, Alara," she'd said, a hint of concern in her voice. Alara had mumbled an excuse about a difficult spring thaw, but she knew Brenda saw more than just fatigue. Despite the grueling schedule, the pups thrived. Their growth was astonishing, almost alarmingly rapid. Within weeks, their eyes, once sealed, opened to reveal striking, deep amber irises that seemed to hold ancient knowledge. Reluctantly, Alara gave them names. Shadow, a bold and watchful pup. Luna, graceful and inquisitive. Midnight, the calm, observant one. And Hope, the smallest, who had fought so hard for every breath, and whose trust in Alara was absolute. She rationalized her growing attachment, telling herself it was temporary, that she would find them homes when they were old enough. But with every shared moment, every soft nuzzle, every trust-filled gaze, her heart betrayed her, weaving an unbreakable bond. As weeks bled into months, the pups were no longer pups. Their physical differences became undeniable, morphing from subtle anomalies into pronounced divergences. Their teeth, unnaturally sharp and long, were a far cry from any domestic dogs. Their snouts elongated, giving them a more predatory profile, and their paws, already large, now seemed massive, capable of silently gliding over the forest floor. There was an unusual grace in their movements, an innate fluidity that spoke of wildness, not domestication. Their howls when they began were not the playful yaps of puppies, but deep, resonant cries that carried on the wind, unsettling Alara to her core. Their hunting instincts, even when playing, were unnervingly efficient, a terrifying display of precision. On one of her rare forays into Whitefish with the now adolescent animals, tethered perfectly to her side, the reactions of local dogs were stark. Instead of curious sniffs or barks, there was immediate, visceral fear and aggression. Dogs on leashes lunged and snarled, hackles raised, their owners struggling to control them. Ilara's pack, despite their controlled demeanor, elicited a response rooted in something primeval. Ilara could no longer ignore the mounting dread. The signs were too obvious, too numerous. These were not ordinary dogs. With a knot of fear tightening in her stomach, she made an appointment with Dr. Ethan Reed, the only area vet located a 10's drive away in Kalispell. Each mile brought a growing sense of impending doom. Dr. Reed, a kind man with a weathered face and a reputation for quiet competence, met her in the examination room. His professional demeanor, usually jovial, shifted to profound concern as he examined each animal. He palpated, listened, peered into their mouths, his brow furrowed in concentration. The silence in the room was punctuated only by the soft thud of their large paws and the occasional low rumble from Shadow. Finally, Dorit excused himself briefly, then returned, his face pale. He closed the door, the click echoing with a chilling finality. "Mrs. Vance," he began, his voice low, "these are not bones." Alara's breath hitched. She clutched Hope, who leaned into her amber eyes meeting Alara's with complete, unwavering trust. "These are wolves," Dr. Reed continued, his gaze unwavering. "Black wolves, Canis lupus, a rare melanistic mutation." The words hung in the air, cold and definitive. "Wolves?" Alara whispered, the question barely escaping her lips. "No, impossible." Dr. Reed explained, his voice laced with regret. They are federally protected, Mrs. Vance. It's illegal to possess them. I, I have a duty to report this to the Fish and Wildlife Service. The world, which Alara had fought so hard to rebuild, threatened to tear her impossible family apart, hinting at something far more complex than abandoned pets. Dr. Reed's words had struck Alara like a physical blow. Wolves. Black wolves. The world tilted on its axis, the weight of the legal ramifications crushing down on her. Federally protected, illegal to possess, immediate confiscation. The impossible truth of their identity, coupled with the threat of losing them forever, ripped through her already fractured defenses. In a voice she barely recognized as her own, raw with desperation, she begged Dr. Reed for one more day, just 24 hours to say goodbye. He hesitated, his face a mask of conflict, before reluctantly nodding. The drive home from Kalispell was agonizing. The wolves, oblivious in their youthful joy, played softly in the back of the truck, their amber eyes glinting with innocent curiosity. Their easy contentment amplified Alora's dread, a crushing guilt settling in her chest. She had brought this upon them, this impossible bond that would now be brutally severed. That night, Alara did not sleep. She sat by the dying embers of the fire, the four adolescent wolves curled close around her, their warm bodies a bittersweet comfort. Hope rested her head on Alara's lap, a soft, rhythmic breathing, a torment against the silence of Alara's racing thoughts. This stolen time, this night of vigil, was both solace and an unbearable countdown. At precisely 10 a.m., a large, dark green transport van rumbled down the dirt track, its heavy tires spitting gravel. It pulled to a stop outside her cabin, its presence an ominous shadow against the overcast Montana morning. Two figures emerged. Officer Ben Carter, a stern-faced man in his mid-50s, radiating bureaucratic authority, and Officer Anya Sharma, younger, perhaps early 30s, her expression a careful blend of professionalism and something Alara couldn't quite decipher. As Alara stepped onto the porch, the four wolves moved with practiced unity, positioning themselves around her. Their hackles rose almost imperceptibly, a low rumble vibrating in their chests, their amber eyes fixed on the approaching strangers. The officers stopped short, their faces visibly stunned. These are pure Canis lupus, black phase. All four of them, Officer Carter stated, a note of incredulity in his voice, his hand instinctively dropping to the tranquilizer gun holstered at his hip. Officer Sharma, too, seemed momentarily speechless. Dr. Matthews said wolves, but this is unprecedented, she murmured, her gaze sweeping over the magnificent, inky-furred animals. Alara's grief solidified into fierce defiance. She stood her ground, her voice ringing with protective fury. They are not dangerous. They are my family. I have raised them for 4 months. They have known nothing but kindness and care from me. She recounted their gentle coexistence, the trust they had built, the impossible bond that now tied her to these creatures of the wild. Officer Carter, unmoved, insisted on protocol, his voice firm. Mrs. Vance, we understand your attachment, but these are wild animals, federally protected. It is illegal to possess them. They pose a risk, both to themselves and to the community. His words were cold, precise, emphasizing the illegality and danger, dismissing her claims of an unbreakable bond. But Officer Sharma's gaze was more nuanced. Her questions, while professional, held a subtle undercurrent of something more. Can you tell us about their pack dynamics? Any unusual behavioral assessments? How have they reacted to strangers? Her focus on these specific traits, beyond routine capture, hinted at a deeper, unspoken concern. It wasn't just about the illegal possession of wolves. It felt like they wanted these wolves. Then came the devastating blow. Officer Carter stated, "They will be taken to a sanctuary, Mrs. Vance. It's likely they'll be separated to ensure proper integration." The words, clinical and final, promised the complete dissolution of her family. Alara's breath hitched. She couldn't bear the thought. "Please," she pleaded, her voice cracking, "just one more day. To say goodbye properly. Let me prepare them." Officer Sharma's gaze met Alara's, seeing the raw, profound bond, the agony in her eyes. After a moment of silent communication, She turned to Carter, a subtle nod passing between them. "One more day," she stated, her voice softer than Carter's. "But we'll be back tomorrow morning." Promptly. As the officers left, the transport van a receding shadow on the horizon, Ilara felt a cold unease creep into her heart. Their urgency, their almost aggressive focus on retrieval, seemed to go beyond standard protocol. It was a targeted demand. A nagging suspicion took root. They didn't just want wolves, they wanted these specific wolves. The question of why and how they knew exactly where to find them began to twist into a chilling knot of conspiracy in her mind. The last day was a blur of bittersweet farewells. Ilara took the wolves on a final long hike through their familiar forest, the scent of pine and damp earth clinging to them. She prepared a feast of venison, watching them devour it with a ferocity she would miss. Each touch, each shared glance was steeped in a grief that felt impossibly vast. She tried to memorize their wild grace, the texture of their dark fur, the depth of their amber eyes. Past midnight, as the cabin settled into a mournful silence, Hope collapsed. Her breathing became shallow, ragged, her tiny body racked with tremors. Ilara's veterinary instincts, long dormant, snapped to attention. The symptoms were unmistakable: acute pain, rapid deterioration, a probable intestinal blockage. But here, deep in the wilderness, without a proper clinic, without sterile equipment, without even the legal right to treat her, Ilara was utterly isolated. An agonizing dilemma presented itself. Driving to Kalispell was too far, too risky. Not only would Hope likely die on the journey, but any vet would immediately report the illegal possession, condemning all four. The alternative? Operating herself. Illegal, dangerous, a direct violation of every professional boundary she had once held sacred. The ghosts of Dr. Silas Thorne and Martha swirled in her mind, the memory of her last failure a cold, metallic taste in her mouth. But the image of Hope, gasping for breath, pushed through the paralyzing fear. Ilara chose courage over failure. She would operate. With grim determination, Ilara cleared the kitchen table, transforming it into a makeshift operating theater. Her hands, despite their trembling, moved with a practiced precision as she laid out her long unused surgical instruments, sterilizing them over the roaring stove. "Stay back," she commanded the other three wolves, her voice low but firm. Incredibly, they obeyed, receding into the shadows at the edge of the room, their amber eyes fixated on Hope, their silent vigil a heavy presence. Ilara's palpation of Hope's abdomen confirmed her suspicion, a hard, unyielding mass. A memory surfaced, a fleeting image of Hope, days earlier, gnawing on an old bone she'd found near the creek. No time for regrets now. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, Ilara made the first incision. The scalpel, cool and sharp, cut through Hope's delicate fur and skin. Her hands, though shaking, moved with the remembered rhythm of a skilled surgeon. Reaching into the abdominal cavity, Ilara carefully located the obstruction. With meticulous care, she extracted a 3-inch bone fragment. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, unnaturally smooth, almost polished, with a strange dark sheen that caught the lantern light. Not a typical elk bone. A prickle of unease ran down her spine. It looked manufactured, artificial, but her focus remained solely on saving Hope. She pushed the unsettling thought aside, tucking the fragment onto a nearby cloth. Delicately, Ilara repaired the inflamed intestine, her movements precise and measured despite the sweat stinging her eyes. She administered a potent dose of antibiotics, praying they would be enough. Shadow, Luna, and Midnight remained frozen, their unblinking amber eyes fixed on Hope, their unspoken trust a heavy, humbling weight in the silent room. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Ilara finished. Exhausted, shaking, she carefully closed the incision. She stroked Hope's head, whispering, "You'll be okay, little one. You'll be okay." She looked up at the other wolves, their gazes still fixed on their packmate. "She'll be okay," Ilara repeated, her voice thick with emotion, hoping it was true. She collapsed into a chair, her body aching, her mind reeling. Picking up the extracted fragment, she turned it over and over in her trembling fingers. "It's so smooth," she muttered, the strange dark sheen catching the lantern light, almost polished. The prickle of unease morphed into a cold, hard knot of suspicion. This was more than just an old bone. It felt wrong. This biomarker subtly hinted at a hidden human-related danger and a conspiracy behind the wolves' extraordinary existence. If you're finding Alara's story as gripping as I am, you won't want to miss a single twist as this conspiracy unravels. Make sure to hit that like button, share this video with fellow thriller enthusiasts, and subscribe to stay tuned. You have no idea what's coming next, and the immediate life-threatening danger is about to intensify. Hope's recovery was nothing short of miraculous. Within days, the small wolf was not only up and moving, but displaying a vitality that defied the severity of her recent surgery. It was a testament to Alara's desperate skill and the wolf's own inherent, powerful resilience. The bitter knowledge that this remarkable little creature, along with her siblings, would soon be taken, cast a long shadow over Alara's every waking moment. She spent the entire week soaking in every fleeting interaction, every shared gaze, every soft nuzzle with her impossible family, knowing their time together was agonizingly short. On the third day of that agonizing week, a familiar vehicle rumbled up the track. It was Brenda Miller, her face etched with a concern, but also a determined glint in her eyes. She carried a thick stack of papers. "Alara, the whole town's talking," Brenda began, her voice earnest. "We started a petition in Whitefish. People heard about your wolves. They're on your side. We're not letting them just take them." The unexpected surge of community support, a lifeline thrown from the outside world, gave Alara a flicker of hope she hadn't dared to entertain. The seventh day dawned, crisp and cool, a heavy silence hanging in the air. This was it, the day the officers would return. Alara, needing one last moment of profound connection, took the wolves for a final hike deep into the familiar forest. The sun, just beginning its ascent, dappled through the dense canopy, painting streaks of gold and shadow on the pine needle-strewn ground. 2 miles from the cabin, the world exploded. A guttural growl, deep and chilling, reverberated through the trees, Ayumayan, rattling Alara to her core. A massive grizzly bear, enraged and territorial, burst from the undergrowth, charging directly at them. Its sheer size and ferocity were terrifying, its roar shaking the very ground beneath Alara's feet. Terror seized her, paralyzing her for a fatal instant. But the wolves didn't hesitate. In an instant, their collective being shifted. They weren't pets, they were a pack. Their response was immediate, synchronized, and devastatingly strategic. Before Alara could even fully register the danger, they had positioned themselves between her and the charging behemoth. Shadow, the largest and boldest, slammed into the bear's shoulder, a black blur of muscle and fury. Luna, agile and quick, darted in, snapping at its flank. Midnight, with uncanny precision, targeted the rear legs, forcing the bear to falter. And even Hope, the smallest, her body still healing, lunged with incredible courage, snapping at the grizzly's snarling face, driving it back. This wasn't a blind, frenzied attack. It was a coordinated defense, a testament to incredible intelligence and an almost unprecedented gratitude. They weren't fighting to kill the bear, but to protect Alara, forcing it to retreat, to cede the ground. The grizzly, clearly realizing it faced not just one opponent, but a formidable unified force, let out a frustrated huff, turned, and crashed back into the undergrowth, vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. The adrenaline coursed through Alara, leaving her trembling. The wolves, limping slightly but alive, immediately returned to her. They circled, nudging her, licking her face, their amber eyes soft with concern, checking for injuries. Alara collapsed onto the forest floor, sobbing, her arms wrapped around them. "You crazy, beautiful, impossible creatures," she choked out, tears streaming down her face. "You saved me." Moments later, as Alara struggled to compose herself, the familiar rumble of the transport van echoed through the trees. Officers Carter and Sharma emerged, their faces already grim. They immediately noticed the scrapes and limps of the wolves, and Alara's tear-stained face, her shock still palpable. Alara, barely coherent, recounted everything. Her voice was raw with emotion as she described the grizzly, the terror, and the wolves' deliberate, coordinated actions to protect her. She emphasized their incredible intelligence, their loyalty, the depth of their bond. Officer Carter, usually so unyielding, listened intently, his expression shifting from skepticism to profound shock. He looked at the injured wolves, then at Alara, then back at the animals, his face pale. This was no ordinary animal encounter. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over the dial pad. "This is unprecedented," he muttered, then made the call to his supervisor, his voice low but firm. The situation had just escalated beyond standard protocol, unknowingly drawing the attention of darker forces interested in these extraordinary animals. Officer Carter's call triggered an immediate and comprehensive review. Alara's isolated cabin, once her sanctuary, transformed into a buzzing research hub. Biologists, behavioral specialists, and veterinarians descended upon her property, their scientific curiosity piqued by the extraordinary account of the grisly attack and the unusual nature of the black wolves. Their presence was initially daunting, but Alara understood it was necessary. Among the team was Dr. Eris Thorne, a young, ethically driven biologist with an earnest curiosity that reminded Alara faintly of Silas. He was particularly intrigued by the wolves' display of intelligence and coordinated behavior. It was to him that Alara showed the unusual bone fragment she'd extracted from Hope, recounting the strange smoothness, the dark sheen. Dr. Thorne's brows furrowed, his scientific mind immediately recognizing its incongruity with natural bone. Days turned into a blur of blood draws, behavioral observations, and genetic sequencing. Dr. Thorne worked tirelessly, his initial skepticism giving way to profound concern. He discovered unique genetic markers in the wolves' blood samples, markers not found in any known wild wolf populations. These weren't just melanistic wolves, or Saskatchewan, they were something more. Pooling their findings, driven by an accelerating sense of urgency, Alara and Dr. Thorne began to connect the dots. The unusual bone, the anomalous genetics, the wolves' advanced intelligence, the FWS's initial aggressive posture, the deliberate abandonment of 4 newborn, genetically distinct animals in a remote location. Piece by agonizing piece, they unearthed compelling evidence of a classified corporate/governmental program, Project Chimera. It was a chilling revelation. The project aimed to create genetically enhanced predators for undisclosed military or corporate security purposes, pushing the boundaries of ethical science. Alara's wolves were not merely abandoned pets. They were test subjects, discarded to cover tracks after the project deemed them failed or simply no longer needed. The review culminated in a tense, claustrophobic meeting within Alara's cabin, transformed into a makeshift conference room. At the head of the long table sat Director Evelyn Hayes, the cold, calculating head of Project Chimera, her impeccably dressed figure radiating an icy authority. She was flanked by 2 imposing security personnel, their presence a silent threat. Alara stood, defiant, before a large projection screen displaying complex genetic diagrams, images of Hope's bone fragment, and her meticulous documentation of the wolves' behavior and development. Shadow, Luna, Midnight, and Hope sat calmly but vigilantly behind her, their powerful presence commanding attention, their amber eyes unwavering. Alara presented her case, her voice ringing with fierce conviction and righteous anger. She laid out the genetic findings, the biomarker bone, and the overwhelming evidence of Project Chimera. She confronted Hayes directly, her gaze unflinching. "You didn't abandon puppies, Director Hayes. You discarded living, sentient beings after your unethical experiments failed. But they didn't fail. They thrived, and now the world will know why." Her passionate argument for the wolves' right to live freely and for the truth to be exposed was undeniable. The 4 wolves behind her remained a silent, intelligent witness to the unfolding drama, their very existence a powerful testament to her words. Adding to the internal pressure, the mounting public support, fueled by Brenda Miller's petition and now leaked information about the project, created an external storm that even Director Hayes could not ignore. The combined weight of overwhelming scientific evidence, burgeoning public outcry, and the ethical support of Dr. Eris Thorne led to a groundbreaking, unprecedented decision. Project Chimera was exposed and dismantled, its unethical practices brought to light. In a new beginning forged in the crucible of truth and loyalty, Alara Vance was granted a special federal permit as a wildlife guardian. Her property, her beloved cabin in the Montana wilderness, was officially designated a private wolf sanctuary. She had fought not just for her family, but to expose a conspiracy to protect all genetically engineered animals, and in doing so found her true purpose once more. 3 years ago, Martha Thompson, now Alara Vance, had sworn off connection, off care, off the crushing weight of responsibility for any living thing. That promise, forged in the sterile horror of a veterinary clinic, stood over the motionless body of her mentor, Dr. Silas Thorne, and the young deer they couldn't save. 20 minutes of desperate, blood-soaked efforts had stolen everything that mattered, leaving her with hands that felt permanently stained and a heart encased in ice. She had fled to the Montana wilderness, seeking isolation as a shield. Yet fate had a different plan. A cardboard box, 4 tiny black-furred creatures, and a desperate whimper shattered her resolve. The vow, once a rigid fortress, crumbled under the weight of her deepest compassion. She embraced the impossible, nurturing them, naming them, loving them, even as their true nature. Black wolves, genetically enhanced test subjects of the sinister Project Chimera, began to surface. Her journey from a solitary recluse haunted by loss to a fierce guardian fighting a corporate conspiracy was paved with agonizing choices. She broke her sacred vow, risking her freedom, even her life. But in doing so, she saved Hope, Shadow, Luna, and Midnight. In turn, they saved her. From a charging grizzly, from her own self-imposed exile, and from a world that preferred secrets to truth. Alara Vance, no longer Martha Thompson, now stood as a beacon of fierce conviction. Her property a sanctuary, Project Chimera dismantled. She had not only protected her impossible family, but had found her own healing, proving that some promises are meant to be broken for a greater truth to emerge. N. Words 288.